All right. So this is an article, you know, we can take what we can take from it and the rest will trash. But I thought there was some interesting things in this article regarding the overself. So it, like I said, we're going to take what we can take from it. So all religions talk about one God, yet people assume it's making reference to a supreme being. Well, this assumption is not far off the mark. It's not quite the supreme being most people think, which I hear a lot of that as well now on my journey, just addressing the supreme being, but exactly in what essence, right? Because we're coming off of the religious thought forms that we had, lower frequencies, where we were assuming that we served a power that was super emotional and attached emotionally to all of the things that we do, when in reality, that's why we're to work out our own salvation, because it's us. We answer to what we did and we work out our salvation from that point on. So we don't have this emotional being over us that's sad at us. We are being put in positions to outplay our lives the way that the divine purpose was set up from the beginning. So that's why this supreme being is not an emotional being like they try to make us believe in the religious thinkings of it. Because we're looking to open up our inner selves, right? Which is where we are made in his image. So truly everything should revert back to self. Yeah, so that's my rant on that. And I say that to say, because I've been doing what you call shadow work, which a lot of us did and have been doing for a while since we got into the truth. Even if it was the wrong way, we were just being tested to see if we were willing to give up of ourselves for a better, right? Which is the definition of shadow work. And throughout my shadow work, what I found is that's why when I had wrote a comment that I was talking to somebody on YouTube, and I was making reference to how when we say all praises to the Most High, we are self-affirming too. Because if you think about yourself as a portion of the one supreme, then you'll stop allowing yourself to fall short in worship. And I'm not saying don't worship, but I am saying what happens is religion has placed us in a place of only worship, and that's it. There's no work that entails that. So how are you going to get back to your overself? So anyways, back to this article. All right, so your spiritual body is merely an extension of your real self. That real self is called the overself. The overself sends out a pseudopod, something that many call your soul or psyche, which inhabits the physical body so it can experience and learn that which cannot be learned within spiritual planes. This is why we was cast down here. This is why the fall was necessary, as you might hear people say. All right, so knowing about the experience of your overself is hugely important, as you are currently on 1/10 consciousness, while your overself is fully 10/10 consciousness. So I think that's very deep, because that's how we know when we're able to tap in, because we know down here we're on a lower dimension. Your overself body is at the highest peak of the dimension, which is why in the vision it was a bigger me controlling a smaller me. All right, so this is something else that I found interesting in here. So most people would like to think that they know what God is, yet the closest being to you that we can term a God is your own overself. Sadly, many have little or no idea of what it is or that it even exists. Your physical body is not the real you, as it is just a shell to enable a part of the real you to be on this planet. There is a God, a good God, a fair God, but of course, God is not the same as a human. This is why we're talking about the overself body and why it's not even on the same plane or dimension as our physical body. All right, so it is useless to attempt to comprehend what God is when most people can not even comprehend their own overself. Ding, 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 bingo. This is why we have to stop seeing ourselves as separate from God, because if we are creatures of thought forms, which is what we think, what we manifest, and truly when we become powerful, we start to learn that when you separate yourself from this supreme, you are not going to be able to achieve your higher self because you see yourself as separate. So you're putting an unattainable goal in your mind space. All right. Okay, just as you cannot comprehend your overself, nor can you comprehend the overself of your overself, we are going to realms quite beyond human comprehension, while existing in the third dimensions and its limitations. We exist in the third dimension, but every time we talk about meditation and even spiritual messages where you can feel the shift of your mind state going to a higher level, like, you know, when we giving out our lessons and you guys, when we're able to comprehend with somebody that may give a lesson or do something or say something, when you're able to feel that spiritual shift, that's a point of leaving this third dimension that we all have the ability to do, and we all do it, but it's just a matter of recognizing it, which will help us continue to leave this dimension. So your overself resides in the 10th dimension while we're here in the third. So yeah, we are a multi-dimensional being. However, most don't understand what a dimension is. We should elaborate on dimensions before continuing with the overself. We are currently in the third dimension, but let's start at the first and explain up to the third dimension. It is pointless talking about dimensions between 4th and 10th because there is no point of reference. You can only start to comprehend beyond the third once you can consciously astral travel into the 4th dimension. Like I said, we do it all the time, but it's kind of like I was just explaining, that recognition of it is how we're able to consciously continue. So the first dimension is like a train on a single track running between 2 points. It can only go forward and backwards. So we have length only. Second dimension is like a car. It can also go forward and backwards, move from side to side, but now we have length and breadth. Third dimension is like a plane. It can also go forward and backwards, move from side to side. It can also move up and down. So now we got length, breadth, and height. In the 4th dimension, time can be a very variable. Hence, how trained people can see into the future based on the record of probabilities within the Akashic records. Again, the Akashic records, that's our records. That's us again. Time exists within all dimensions, but not beyond the 10th dimension. So in the 5th dimension, space can be variable, as in we can have an object within the room that's smaller than the object itself, something that can be very hard to comprehend due to the limitations of the 3rd dimension we live in. So this was interesting to me because I feel like, well, when you're thinking about how we're multidimensional beings, how does that actually work? And I never really knew all of the details regarding the dimensions, so I found that very intriguing. But what I also wanted to show is something that I have shown before here, but it made a little more sense. This is the chakras, and it's breaking it down within the dimensions, right? Each chakra, 3rd dimension, 4th dimension, and 5th dimension. And I mean, as we just read, it can go up, right? So this is just an example to know on which dimension we exist, which pertaining to our chakras. So if our overself is on the 10th dimension, ain't no telling what we'll be able to do once we reach that dimension, because all of these things are already so intriguing. So, so the 2nd dimension will cast the 1st dimension shadow, so on and so forth. This is why some UFOs are seen and not registered on radars. This is something else that I thought was interesting too, because we got all this high power technology, but when the ships come in, they don't have nothing that can really track it. And it's because you are seeing the third dimensional shadow of the fourth dimensions. So that's why you can't see it on a radar, because we are in the third dimension and we are a cast off of the shadow of the fourth, basically. So pretend you're looking at your shadow, third and fourth dimension. That's an example that I could kind of explain it with. All right, so now I'm gonna go to the lesson. I'm going to the keys of Enoch real quick. All right, so keys of Enoch, page 396, and you guys will kind of gather why I kind of more so wanted to elaborate on the overself. All right, sorry, page 395 is where I needed to start. So this key gives us an explanation of the resurrection of the dead by claiming all life that is based on a higher light code structure. In other words, this is verse 3, I jumped down to 3. In other words, at the day of graduation or judgment, aka both the physical embodiment of the overself and the light body overself come together to receive codings for the next level of soul growth based upon the harmony of the overself body within all of its molecular embodiments. Let me give y'all the definition and the keys of the overself. All right. So the overself body, the where did it go? Oh, right there. My bad, y'all. All right. So the overself body, the pre-existent higher body of light, which exists for spiritual physical beings prior to their incarnation. So we had this body before we came down here in our earthly bodies. This is the body that's been there for all of our lives, right? This body domes with realized physical humanity, which has completed the synthesis of the 5 inner matter energy vehicles, one of several overself vehicles in Shekinah universe of creation, leading to the new levels of growth within the activity of total deity. The exact nature of the overself relationship is open-ended, which is what I was explaining also earlier when I talked about how we're multi-dimensional beings, which is basically we are interacting with more than one dimension at once. That's the open-ended universe that you hear about in the keys. However, the immediate overself hierarchy includes Elohistic lords, paradise sons, orders of sonships, Christ, overself, sons and daughters of life. This is just the examples of the overself hierarchy. So y'all know the Elohistic lords who we are made in the image of. That's just one example that I would give y'all real quick. And then we go in. Oh, let's define light body too. So a divine body coded from Godhead to be internal. So it talked about both the overself body and the light body. All right, verse 6. So the overself body coordinating, oh no, not there, I'm sorry. Verse 12. So beloved, we should recognize that there are 3 types of evolution that can be coded out of the activity of the living light during the transition of the physical form. So this is what it's going to look like. This is the 3 types of the bodies. So types are 1, physical man, which can be coded from the meta functions of his existence purely to another physical man on the same scale of meta matter, positive incarnation. Basically, in other words, we've been here reincarnated more than once. So that's why you see purely to another physical man talking about incarnating more than once. reincarnating. 2, the physical man possessing the light grid of evolving soul, which can be coded from the life of the living into more advanced spiritual physical embodiment within the lower heavens. We're in the lower heavens now, which is planet Earth is a part of the lower heavens. So such man is a light blueprint of the given creator God's image and similitude, which is what I read in the definition of the overself. The creator gods being the Elohim. 3, spiritual physical man possessing a complete unity with the spiritual Shekinah extended out of the life of the living, which is capable of resurrection into the Adam Kadmon archetype body of light. He has, by virtue of completing his spiritual assignment, the prerogative to participate in the higher heavens, which work directly with the Father's image and similitude. There's a difference between the creator God's image, and there's a difference between the Father's image, 2 different levels, right? Therefore, verse 15, spiritual mankind is moved from the Kiowan common life codes by the higher evolution, which uses the Father's I don't know what that word is. Hold on, let me try again. Nartamid, okay? And let me get the definition of that so I don't lose anybody, because I just had it up. So it's the eternal light. That's what that is. All right. So let me read that one again. Spiritual mankind is removed. So once we spiritualize ourselves, we remove from the common life codes by higher evolution, which uses the Father's light to call forth humanity into a state of resurrection. This is the resurrection that these religions don't tell us about. This is what it is, right? And this is describing it for y'all. Those who have radiated love into the light of the living, into the greater universes, will continue to live off the power of the image of the luminaries, because they have learned to share pulsations of love within continuity. Okay. Verse 17. Oops. All right. Those who do not pulsate love into the greater image, which establishes continuity and change within continuum, deny the redemptive light. This is the 2/3. It's what they own. And the order of the progression, which exists in the myriad thresholds, connecting the love of the living with the life beyond the measure of flesh. Those who deny light will return to their conscious beginning in the form of flesh, or even in lower forms of metamatter. For the flesh is not able to be transformed into the living light. So in other words, if you stay attached to your flesh, that's where you'll remain. You'll be recycled, reincarnated, started all over, right? So in other words, at the end of an evolutionary program, if the genetic code of an individual soul is not deemed worthy for the next step function of species regeneration into light, the soul is placed one or several biological step functions back, reincarnation. And this is actually giving us more descriptive of it, because I'll be wondering how that works. You know, once you're judged, do you go back 1, 2, 3? But it's telling you it can go back one or more, or several. All right, into the living light. The soul is placed one or several biological step functions back, where it must learn through its negative karma how to harmonize with light and love. And what I like about that verse too is it's a precept inside of the sealed portion that talks about how the basically the end of the world would be, and that it would happen through love. Well, why would, at the time I didn't really understand it until now, currently, just where I've been at in my spiritual journey, I'm learning that the love is exactly what is going to kill off the low vibrations, so to speak. So that's why he said in the sealed portion that they will be tormented with love. So now I'm gonna skip down to verse 20. In essence, you exist in consciousness death until you are aware of the power of love, which opens up the visual pathway of ascension into indescribable levels of light essence. Every action in life is a part of the matter, energy, centrifuge, which builds up the consciousness energy units energy units to be sufficiently strong enough to resurrect the dust of life into new wave factors of life. So basically, we don't wake up until we start having the knowledge of self, which also makes you have more love for other things simultaneously. It just goes hand in hand. When you start to learn about yourself, you can empathize with pretty much anyone. So yeah, back to verse 22. All right, so the unused light consciousness is often given to a crippled person or a fatherless child and some other life frame who will use the energy wisely. That's deep. That's just saying, basically, while we sitting around here waiting on a savior and not to do any work, our light factors that we do accumulate, because even a regular Joe may come in contact with some light and be given light. If we don't use it, we lose it, and it's passed on to somebody who could use the energy wisely. Which is deep, because it reminds me of that story about the talents, the man with the talents in the King James Bible. So drawing on consciousness light, you create your own gematria body of light to connect with the wave function of the Zohar light, which allows your outer garment to survive this life and death cycle of physical creation. So this is the detailed version of how we gonna cross over. How do we survive with the low vibrations and the radiation that's coming? How are we going to basically fall into the divine plan and help the plan? Basically, it's explaining that. So whosoever does not seek the light will remain an open vessel for the masters of the angelic fall, who require collective energies of evolving species forms. So it basically has to have a culprit. It got to have a place to dwell, right? A vessel. Now I'm gonna go to verse 30. So therefore, karmic cycles were set in motion for certain forms of creation that were contaminated and needlessly preconditioned by continual material form. So this is the cycle, basically. Even when you come from your past life to your new life, that same karma you got to work out. If you don't work it out in your past life, it follows you over to your next lifetime. And your strengths also follow. But what I'm learning about that is, if you don't tap in, some of them will not come. You really got to dig and snatch them, because they may be from past lives that you have no, connection with. So that's why I've been doing a lot of heart chakra work as well, so that I can uncover some of the things from my past lives that were, not only just my spiritual weaknesses, but my strengths too. I want to recover them all. That's the goal, at least. All right, so moreover, this spiritual inferiority prevented the development of spiritual discrimination, so that souls could not select the proper portion of physical spiritual unity necessary to find the supreme way. That's what happened, right? So 32. Therefore, the physical manifestations of the Adam Kadmon in the form of the Adamic physicals were prevented from realizing their divine overself. That's the lower frequencies that they came down here and intercepted with. And we are to work that out. All right. They did not realize that the physical progression was not completely closed off to the direct remodeling of life from higher planes of creation. So let me read that again. They did not realize that the physical progression was not completely closed off to the direct remodeling of life from the higher planes of creation. I read that again because we always thrive off of the physical, and the way that they're describing this to me is coming off as the lower frequencies, aka the fallen ones, intercepted our program and brought on this low frequency. So we weren't even recognizing things past our physical comprehension. There was more to our evolution that took way beyond what we could physically see. So it's kind of telling us why we haven't been accessing our divine overself. Like the article I started off with, he explained it more plainly. So verse 34, these masters or Satans, plural, were numerous until the present time. Prevented light energy from recycling their lower physical worlds, which would have allowed their worlds to progress into programs designed for the Adam Kadmon. Now, first of all, this scripture here, Satan's is plural, right? Something else the religion left out, that he didn't come alone. He doesn't come alone. When they talk about Satan, and and not only that, but he was the master of light as well. This is how he has so much knowledge. But Satan's plural, and they prevented light energy from recycling their lower physical worlds, which basically would have allowed them to have access to where we are at spiritually when we obtain our Adam Kadmon. So basically, they would have had access to all that and some, not just the lower physical world. So these are programs that were designed for us in our Adam Kadmon so that we would have peace, but they were getting ready to intercept that too. So thus, even knowledge of the Adam Kadmon was limited to a spectral range of spiritual vision. They also prevented spiritual scientific knowledge given by the treasury of knowledge from being used in the worlds they kept in ignorance. Obviously, our world was one of them. Planet Earth was definitely one of them, but there's another indicator to plural, more than one. And then down here in verse 36, I'm just gonna start from, let's see, this part. So the fallen masters appropriated for themselves the title El at the end of their names and corrupted both the physical radiations of sons of light entering the physical plane and the daughters of God who represent the true feminine side of the Godhead. Thus, the daughters of God were prevented from manifesting the higher teaching on earth plane by corrupt priesthoods. That sounds familiar. But this is all reminders to what we have. We hear nothing new under the sun. This incarnation too is no different from way before when the fall first occurred. This is what was going on back then, where there's another indicator right there of what the women were supposed to be doing, but let me not get into a rant on that. All right, so these fallen masters created a hierarchy which was intended to control all religions of the planet in their, in their idolatrous image of God. Moreover, these masters called evolving root races of the planet to cohabit with the fallen Nephilim forms, so as to create a race in the image of Enoch, those who do not aspire to do anything from beyond the material form. This is in the still portion too. We harped on that back in the days when we talked about how they actually mixed races. That's another reference to them doing that then to create material forms. And then also another thing that stood out to me in that verse was root races. Y'all know the root chakra is the first chakra, and majority of the world operates off of the root chakra. Basically, it doesn't go much further for the average person you come encounter with as far as the opening of them chakras. So when I hear root races, that's the race that I think of, is those operating off of that low root chakra. Verse 39. Moreover, out of the plan of removal, out of the divine plan of renewal, the Father has now permitted the angelic hierarchies to overpower the limited fallen creations. And we are here to adhere to the assistance of this, y'all. So the fallen masters who previously allowed the biostratus double spiral to get trapped in metamatter and are now being overthrown. This is resulting in a new flow of light stream energy manifestation from the Adam Kadmon. Verse 43. I saw at the beginning of time how the pre-Agital, the pre-Adamic, the pre-Noachian, and the pre-Jaredite models of life became limited in consciousness form, and heavenly man cried out, "Where is my divine overself?" At that time, only Enochian and Sethian seeds were permitted to enter the house of light and increase the heavenly treasury of wisdom from the experience of the lower spheres. So this is the first time that man cried out and asked where the divine overself was. And then I noticed in this is saying that at that time, only the Enochian and the Sethian seed, which is Enoch and Seth, were permitted to enter in the house of light. But what I find now is interesting is that we are the host for this time frame, for the end of this program. We're the ones who are standing up and claiming our spots in what we know we were supposed to do, right? But what's also interesting in that is now, if you follow the way of true Israel, aka spiritual Israel, those that are doing what the Father says, the ones who were the divine seed, you can actually have access to the lighthouse, right? But see, in this is saying that at this time, only two people's seeds were permitted to enter in the house of light at that time. So I thought that was interesting too, that I wanted to share. And 44, I saw the powers and the control of many Satans, not just one. The powers controlling our three-dimensional spirits emanate very violent explosions, so that parts of chaos formed new planets and trapped women back into cycles of materialization and into the images of the root races that fell from all the aeons. There's that word again, the root races. And trapped them to materializations. That's where we at currently, nothing new under the sun. I heard the Father call and say, "Adam, Adam," and the body answered from the lower heavens and said, "Here I am, Father." And the Father said to him, "Thy seed of light will be numbered with Uriel and the office of redemptive light. And in the aeons of consciousness, the Ur race will complete my work in these heavens and will be numbered with the high command of Uriel and Michael. For in this struggle to abolish the fallen programs of creation, aka the Esau spirit, it is necessary for the order of Michael and the order of Uriel to descend from the higher heavens and rescue the progeny of the Adam that is limited to the three veils of flesh. Now pause. I know we talked about Michael before, back old times, but that is the reason why. So this is just a little spiritual nudge for those of us who don't already do this. But when you hear that name, Michael, try to see what's going on spiritually around you and decode that message, because that is the reason why if you guys ever watch any of Big Levi's videos, he talks about that, and he identifies spiritual messages throughout like newscastings, and he talks about what spirit was present. And the two that he uses a lot is Michael and Uriel. He kind of been had the knowledge about who they are and what they're here for, but their redemption is what is coming to rescue us too, right? That's why anytime I'm going through something, like I'm gonna give y'all an example. They came to my house and tried to, I forgot what it was. They had like some weird inspection that didn't even make no sense. And here I am bugging out about it. And I asked the dude his name, and he says Michael. So I'm like, oh, you cool, you know, and I went on about my business, because to me, that was confirmation of the spirit letting me know I'm just here to protect you and giving me signal after signal. Which another thing that happened was the citing officer who gave us the ticket when we was going to Sis Lana's baby shower, his name was Michael. So that was just something else that I kind of found intriguing, that, you know, our job is to decode our day-to-day spiritual messages, and stuff like that can get past you. Anyways, let me rant over. All right, so they had to descend down here to rescue the prodigy of the Adamic race that is limited to the three veils of flesh. Henceforth, the consciousness of spiritual creation will no longer sleep under the shaded appearance of the false light. I saw how Metatron commissioned the great wisdom of light, and how the higher lords of light no longer isolated the earth. Pause. This is something that really, really is deep right here. The earth was isolated. This is something that's news to me. I just learned this through reading this, but that makes a lot of sense, that we would be over here struggling and have no access. Y'all remember the still portion talked about how the spirit will be taken away for a while, right? I wonder if that's what this is referencing, that we were separated. So anyways, where was I at? Okay, right here. I saw how Metatron commissioned the great wisdom of light. If y'all don't know, Metatron is the angel of knowledge, wisdom, and life. He's like very important in this whole ordeal. And how the higher lords of light no longer isolated the earth. So it would no longer be under the fallen command of the rebellious lords of light. And I saw how the special pre-galactic seed of El race gods, being of the light, walked upon the earth and began to upgrade the dust world creations. Earth is a part of the dust world creations as well. I saw how the elect seed of Enoch and Seth built cities in the heavens, which were modeled upon the earth. They were to prepare the physical seed to cross this threshold of creation, when man learned to cooperate and live as a family of God. That's spiritual too. It's not just talking about physical mankind, it's talking about spiritual mankind. When we learn how to operate as one, meaning, gosh, the spirit has spent so much on me to say, meaning when we go into our prayers, you initiate a ceremony between your family of God, right? That's what this is talking about. Call on the Father, call on the Mother, and acknowledge those ascended masters. That is the ceremony. That's your family. Because yes, we love each other here down here in the physical, but that's the missing piece of the puzzle that we're not taught, is to open up that ceremony with the family of God that we already come from, the ones that we cannot physically see. Because I'm telling y'all, they're in control of everything. And once they start to acknowledge you, that's when you acknowledge them back, that is when you will start to really see your prayers be answered. It's like they communicate with us from the moment we get here on, and we just ignore them. And that's the reason why we got to cycle through these karmatic reincarnations, because we just don't hear that voice. But when we learn how to live and cooperate with them, that's the key, that's the factor right there. So this is not talking about just mankind learning how to live as a family. This is talking about us accessing those who are here for us more than anything we probably ever witnessed. And I saw the glorious biostratus restored in the heavens, and the Antichrist and the anti-Seth powers were overthrown. That's what the goal is. That's what we're here to do. And we on the right track. I'm super excited for us. But anyways, 52. After plugging into the depths of the bottom below consciousness, the souls who, after years of suffering on earth, that's multiple incarnations too, extended their hands over their body of dust and raised up a body of glory, designed for perpetual brightness and God-bearing light, from which all things come, to which all things are designed to return in perfection. That's what they told us we could not be. I think they so cliche for saying that, ain't nothing perfect. When all in all, that is the goal. Wow. So 54. Dust was quickened into divine light, and the elect of the spirit took their seats with the council. The spirit is a part of you as you are a part of it. Come, divine spirit of God, enter the aeons of the divine world without end. And how do we do that? Is how I just explained. First thing you want to do is attune your chakras. Get in tune with your chakras first, because that helps your ascension process. And all praises to the Most High for that lesson, because he gave me so much, and I appreciate that, because I've been on delay. So all praises, y'all.